Hello, everyone. My name is Renee, and I'm here with Sally Norton. I'm a freediver and freediving instructor, and I also do coaching. I'm in Dahab, Egypt, and I've been wanting to talk to Sally Norton about oxalates. I recently just started a low oxalate diet, high protein diet, which is a little bit different than what most freedivers do. Most freedivers are on more of a vegetarian diet and vegan diet. So carnivore is pretty extreme opposite to what most of my peers around me are doing. But what I found in the health benefits of being on carnivore, it's just out of this world. I've been on carnivore now for 5 weeks, and it's just the health changes are absolutely mind-blowing. So I wanted to set up a call with Sally Norton so we can discuss oxalates. What are oxalates? What foods are oxalates found in? Because just in my research about it, I noticed that a lot of the foods that freedivers are eating, these like superfoods, are actually high oxalates, and I don't even know if people are aware of this. So what are oxalates, what foods are they in, and how in general this can affect freediving performance. Sally is extremely knowledgeable on this topic. She has over 35 years of experience, education, and research. Well, let's see, I have all of your credentials written down here. You hold a bachelor's in science of nutrition from Cornell, a master's of public health from Chapel Hill, clinical consultant on a team incorporating holistic healing with using plants in critically ill patients, a contributing author, an editor and researcher, and a faculty member of the Virginia Commonwealth University Department of Social and Behavioral Health. So you're definitely the most knowledgeable person I can think of to talk on this topic. And thank you for being here with me today and taking the time out of your busy schedule. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's great to connect with you. This is exciting to be thinking about plant toxins and sports performance and what diet allows us to not only perform well in sports while we're young and healthy, but also lets us age gracefully and continue to be productive and do things we love to do for our whole life rather than burn out young. And it turns out that my whole field of nutrition and public health has not been paying attention to the oxalate issue, which is a lethal toxin, oxalic acid. It's a known lethal toxin. We've known that you can die from oxalic acid exposure since the late 1700s. And the first European studies that were the real, what we call experimental design in studies, first one in toxicology was done on oxalic acid using animals because so many people were dying accidentally by ingesting oxalic acid by mistake in the early 1800s. So this study came out in 1823 and basically just established that how difficult it is to detect the oxalate in the blood and so on, even though somebody or an experiment was on animals, the animal died. The point of the study was to make sure that the coroner who was looking at the corpse of the person who died from taking oxalic acid could be analyzed and studied to be able to conclusively say what killed the person, and in the concern that it would be easy to intentionally kill someone by poisoning them with oxalic acid. So it was a professor of jurisprudence who was trying to make sure the coroner would be able to detect murder cases and confirm that it was oxalate that was the murder weapon. And so that was what inspired that study. But That's a long time ago. And there's quite a bit of oxalate research and kidney health research because oxalic acid forms a salt called oxalate. Oxalate is the acid combined with calcium or magnesium or potassium or sodium or iron or all these other minerals that are electrolytes in the body connect with oxalic acid, and that becomes a salt called oxalate. So oxalates are this family of molecules that can connect with different minerals. You have calcium oxalate, magnesium oxalate, iron oxalate. These are all oxalates, so we often talk about them in the plural. And those salts form crystals just like the salt in your salt shaker. And those crystals can form in the body and grow into stones in the body, like kidney stones. So most of your kidney stones are made from calcium oxalate. 80% of all kidney stones are calcium oxalate. And it turns out that oxalic acid and the soluble forms of oxalate are produced by plants abundantly in some plants, so abundantly in many tropical plants that that's why they're known to be poisonous. So certain plants you just know to not eat, right? You grow up knowing some plants you can't put in your mouth without harm, and oxalate is one of the big reasons why. And then the plants we've developed as food plants tend to have lower amounts, and some are kind of low, really low, but some that we're eating are high enough to be a trouble. Like in England and the northern U.S., there's a plant called rhubarb, and the leaves of the rhubarb are so high in oxalate that that's a known problem. And young children who accidentally eat the rhubarb leaves can die, get severely sick from oxalate poisoning from eating rhubarb leaves. But the stalks of rhubarb that we use in making desserts and things are very high in oxalate and quite toxic. But that's also true of sorrel, which is popular in Europe and some places in South America as a basic green vegetable. Spinach, Swiss chard, beets and beet greens, very high in oxalate. There are fruits that are used as traditional medicines, like star fruit, that are famous for causing death and permanent renal damage to people from the oxalic acid. So there are those higher end foods that are really high in oxalate. There's a lot of foods that have a medium amount of oxalate, and there's some plant foods that are pretty low in oxalate and safe. And so the idea behind the oxalate-aware eating is that you get less chronic poisoning effects if you eat less of the really high oxalate foods. Unfortunately, a lot of foods that we now call superfoods are the ones that are really high in oxalate, like the spinach, almonds, chocolate, pomegranate, kiwi, nuts and beans and seeds, turmeric. A lot of that stuff, quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth, these things are high in oxalate.
Really? So quinoa as well?
Yeah.
Because quinoa, I would say beets are probably the number one go-to food for a lot of freedivers. I know freedivers, they have beets every morning before they're freediving. They have a beet smoothie and spirulina. I'm not sure if spirulina or
Spirulina's kind of high. Chlorella not so high, but my understanding from the testing we have is that spirulina is pretty high in oxalate, but chlorella not so much. So chlorella would be a safer alternative.
Wow. Because so many freedivers are on like vegetarian or vegan diets that they get their protein from the spirulina or the chlorella as just kind of a substitute for just not eating meat.
So they're eating seaweed basically like fish do instead of fish.
Yeah, and for sure, definitely chia seeds are really popular.
Very high oxalate.
Wow.
Great way to blow out your kidneys. Yeah. And your digestive tract.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And potentially your liver, heart, and lungs, and ultimately leach the bones in the long run.
So does it have any short-term, like immediate benefits as far as health improvement and then negative longer-term health benefits, or is it just like kind of called.
Are you talking about oxalate or the foods that have oxalate in them?
Like if you were to have like beets or spinach or chia seeds, I'm just wondering, because these foods got such a reputation in the world of freediving, that I'm wondering if they got like if they showed any immediate health benefits or improvement in performances, but in the long term, it creates negative effects.
Yeah, so there is no study that you could cite that took a bunch of people and gave them chia bowls for breakfast and then tested their performance against the people who weren't doing chia bowls and chia smoothies for breakfast. So there's no way to know from that kind of way. The other thing is that people who are choosing to eat these foods are otherwise very careful with their health. They're not smokers. They don't drink a lot. They go to bed early. They try to exercise. They try to be good. They are aware of air quality and things like that. And so they're not trashing their health in general. And when you first go on these superfood diets, it has the function like fasting and starvation in a way where you get, at first you get the benefits of not eating a lot of protein and nutrients. There's a sort of, in the beginning, probably a hormetic stress reaction where that stresses the body out enough that it starts healing itself. And you think those foods are healing you, but it's more that they're annoying your system enough that your system responds with its own inherent ability to be strong and heal itself. And that's a difficult concept for some people, but it's the same way that medicine works, where it's a little bit toxic, and that's how medicine might trigger a response in the body to heal itself. That's how cryotherapy works, where you basically get almost close to freezer burn. You get nice and cold, and it's a shock to the system, and the body responds, and it starts healing itself. It changes the brain chemistry, and you feel happier, more energetic, and alive. And with something like cold therapy, that's a very controlled exposure. You go to a cryo chamber for 3 minutes, or you get into an ice bath for 3 minutes, and then you're done. But with food and toxins in food, day in and day out, meal after meal, that's just wearing you out. And in the beginning, it might feel okay. Most people feel pretty good when they start vegan diets and superfood, and a lot of reasons to feel good. It's not just that you're triggering your body to heal itself and fight back and repair, but it's also the social support. Like, there's so much social noise around the idea of superfood that you believe in it so much that's called the placebo effect. When there's a lot of reinforcement from the social world that you're in and a lot of personal buy-in to those ideas, you get a placebo effect, placebo is very real. It's another way of tricking your metabolism into being the best it can be. But in the meantime, this sublethal exposure is having non-lethal effects that are degrading your health over the long run. And there are often zero symptoms for a long time until things get sort of stage 4, advanced stage, when something really serious is happening. All of a sudden, all that coping your body's doing collapses.
Wow. And so would you say that it's almost near impossible to be completely super healthy if you're on a vegetarian or vegan diet? And I'm not trying to like sort of throw those under the bus, but is it even possible to live? Like, is there enough low oxalate foods that you could be vegetarian or vegan?
Well, it depends on the goal. If you want to get rid of your aches and pains and feel better and sleep better, you can just switch from high oxalate foods. It's a little tricky because so many of the grains and beans are high in oxalate. You need to live on refined white rice for starch and use potato starch to thicken a sauce and so on. And you're still going to be on kind of a high carb, and you're really at risk for incomplete proteins, and fat-soluble nutrients are very low on a vegetarian diet. But you could stay vegan and switch from, say, spinach and beets and quinoa to white rice and cabbage and some other foods, and really help sleep and aches and pains and reduce the development of arthritis and maybe slow down the development of osteoporosis and other loss of electrolytes, and reduce the amount of inflammation and free radicals in your body and feel better. And so that's a great place to start. And it's still a big deal metabolically to shift from a high oxalate diet that's full of pomegranates and quinoa and almond butter and nut snacks and nut bars and beets and spinach smoothies. All that stuff is really, really together creates a very toxic situation in the body. And you really can't tell for a long time. And we see this even in the genetic form of oxalaria, the disease that can kill people because they're producing oxalate internally to a level that's toxic. Those people often show up all of a sudden with complete renal failure and in terrible conditions with fairly few symptoms beforehand. So it's known that even in the most extreme cases, you might not have symptoms, but you could just stay vegan if you wanted less aches and pains and better bones and a better shot at health. You could do that. But if you really want to optimize your current and long-term health and potential for performance and really be able to push your body and become athletic and perform well either at work or in school or in an athletic endeavor, you would want to have better nutrition than what you can get from a vegan diet or even a vegetarian diet. It's very hard to get some critically important fat-soluble vitamins, minerals. The stuff in vegetables are kind of bound to fibers and in forms that your body has to transform in order to come up with a nutrient. So you have to be able to digest the stuff, you have to be able to extract it from the digestive tract and absorb it, and you have to be able to transform it into a nutrient that the cells recognize. The nutrients in plants are not the same form that we need for ourselves. So people think that retinol and beta carotene is vitamin A. It's not. It's not at all the same chemically, and it's bound up with fibers, and you're just using a lot of fiber in plant foods to be in a slightly starved state. And there's a benefit to be slightly starved. And, they show that calorie restriction has some benefits for longevity. The problem is that if you've got this low-grade deficiency happening and you're eating deficient foods and you're eating the toxins with the deficient foods like oxalate, you're going to end up both toxic and deficient, and that's how we turn it into cancer, early aging. I just know I was vegetarian for 8 years in my youth, and then I was vegan for 8 years. So I had 16 years of this to destroy my own health. And I'm now 55 years old. And it took me until 48 to figure out I still wasn't on a good diet, having added meat, because I was still doing sweet potatoes almost every day.
Yes, sweet potatoes are a really common food here.
Sweet potatoes,
are eating those left and right. I myself included. I used to eat them all the time.
Yeah, they're like a bread. They're easy to prepare.
And what's great is you think they're healthy.
Yeah, because I used to tell everybody to eat sweet potatoes because they're low allergen food. I knew I had all this inflammation and I was getting really hyperreactive to all the foods. And this is one of the side effects of too much oxalate in your body. You damage your immune system, and your immune system starts being hyperreactive to everything, and it gets to be like you can't eat anything. And you're more and more allergic to stuff and have all these intolerances and bad reactions to either environmental chemicals, fragrances, pollen, foods you're eating, and you get more and more like frail almost, or like just super sensitive. And that's your immune system being constantly aggravated and triggered. The oxalate is, whether it's an ion or the ions pulled together as these molecules that pull together into nanocrystals. So nanocrystals are so small, they're smaller than a fat molecule. They're really, really little, but they're highly charged and reactive and quite toxic. And nanocrystals of oxalic acid, oxalate, calcium oxalate is the typical one. So calcium oxalate nanocrystals are just as toxic as asbestos, okay, or silica. Silica causes black lung disease. That's what kills the coal miners in the coal mining industry. It's very toxic. And so when you're eating a lot of high oxalate foods like beets and spinach and almonds and quinoa, you are basically eating stuff that becomes asbestos to your cells. And when the cells encounter these crystals, they freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, this is dangerous because it causes a depolarization of the membrane. They get leaky. They start spilling their potassium. You start losing potassium. This body starts getting acidic. The mitochondria are a membrane structure, they stop working as well. Some of their enzymes that run the energy production cycle in the mitochondria start getting lost, and it can't function as well, and you get less ATP produced, so way less energy, and you get a lot of fatigue from this inflammation. And that's because of the crystals are causing this damage to the mitochondrial membrane. The mitochondria start dying, and if there's enough of it, it takes about a third of the mitochondria and the whole cell dies. And you don't notice that one or two cells died or a few 100,000 of them died because you gazillions of cells, right? So this can be going on in the background. You've got low-grade inflammation. You're producing less ATP in a certain tissue, and it depends on what tissue is getting exposed to the oxalate. Now, of course, if you're eating it in food, your mouth tissues get exposed to it, your throat, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, your rectum, your anus, the whole digestive system. And you can tell, I mean, the studies of either case studies or so on, you get this micro bleeding, very small GI bleeds, inflammation and corrosion in the digestive tract are known with oxalic acid poisoning and people that get in trouble. I have clients, I had someone yesterday bring me pictures of her whole stomach, top to bottom. The mucosa is a mess. It looks like she's got like these little cancers, and it's a mess. And it's probably because of years of veganism. Then she went into paleo, then she went into keto, was eating a lot of nuts. And in the keto diet, people start substituting bread and carbohydrates for now they're doing almonds and nuts a lot. And that's the almonds and nuts are full of other plant chemicals that are hard on the system. They're designed to be hard on your system because nuts, designed by nature, they're a seed like other seeds. Grains are the same way. Beans are the same way. They're seeds. The seeds of the plant is the baby. That's the next generation. So the plant's plan is to trick you to help them move the seeds around, get you to eat the fruit or whatever. And then you're supposed to leave that seed behind in your feces, ready to germinate next year. You're supposed to poop out an undigested seed. They're designed to be not digestible. They're also full of other toxic minerals and other toxic compounds. But nuts and seeds are not meant to be digested. They're designed that way. And in the process of them being indigestible, they're quite corrosive to the gut. But oxalate alone is enough. And you can't get rid of the oxalates through soaking or cooking and all of that, which you can reduce lectins and the enzyme inhibitors and phytates. You can reduce them with long soaking, 3.5 days, plus a heavy cook, like with beans, you have to, and lectins, you have to use a pressure cooker to get enough heat to kill the lectin, which is a protein that is a gut-damaging plant compound. Most of these plant compounds are gut-damaging. So with oxalate, it's a much bigger story than all that because oxalate easily floats into your bloodstream. And from your digestive tract, it goes straight to your liver. And oxalate, the liver can't fix it. There's no metabolic way for the body to change oxalate. All it can do is move it around and excrete it. And ultimately, it's heading for the kidneys, and we pee it out of our kidneys. And sometimes you can tell that you're peeing a lot of oxalate because when it's a lot, you get more and more crystals coming out in the urine, unless your kidneys are so full of oxalate that they almost block the passage of the oxalate. If you're really sick with oxalate in your body, you no longer see the oxalate in the urine anymore. It gets trapped in the body because the kidneys aren't working well, and the kidneys are full of calcium oxalate, and so it becomes a filter, and it keeps building up in the kidney and can't even pass through to the kidneys. And also, when the body's got this acidosis that happens as a result of spilling all these electrolytes, the kidneys also lose their ability to excrete the oxalate. But let's say that you're just not that sick with oxalate. You just love Nutella or, yeah,
that was really my weakness for a little while.
Quinoa for lunch and your chia pudding for breakfast. And so you're just doing that amount, and you might see crystally urine. And the way you can tell is the urine is cloudy. Okay. That's an important thing for people to look for. If you get cloudy urine more than once in a blue moon, that's a sign that you probably have too much oxalate in your body and probably too much in your diet.
Okay.
So that would be something for people to know about. If you are
to just pay attention to.
Pay attention to the urine. And when it's cloudy, that means that a lot of oxalate is moving around in your body. And you might be able to notice that it's cloudy after a day when you kind of had a headache or you felt fatigued or you weren't so motivated or whatever you tried to do that day just didn't go as well as you thought it would, or you started dropping things, you became uncoordinated. That's some of the changes in the neurological function of the central nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves themselves. You kind of lose your eye-hand coordination when you're toxic with oxalates, when it's moving around, and you're more likely to be clumsy and drop stuff, or be headachy, or have a bad memory, or be irritable, or grumpy, or depressed, or feel unmotivated. A lot of that is neurotoxicity, and oxalate's quite hard on the nervous system, so your judgment and performance can go down, and your general happiness as well.
Sure. Freediving performance, I think, will
for sure
be affected without a doubt.
For sure. So there might be short-term effects with oxalate, but often you don't notice it. It's more the insidious, constant erosion of the health of the system, your ability to generate energy, your ability to hang on to your electrolytes. You can be slowly developing mineral deficiencies in the bones, because what happens is you absorb the oxalate or the oxalic acid in the form of potassium oxalate or sodium oxalate. Those are soluble forms. And the oxalic acid and the potassium molecule easily break apart in the liquid of the blood, and the oxalic acid side of that salt will pick up calcium or magnesium or iron. And so it starts grabbing these things, or they go for it. And you get these insoluble oxalate salts that form crystals in the blood that are toxic, but at the same time, you're draining your system. You're basically stealing iron, calcium, and magnesium from your blood. And in cases of direct poisoning, we see it takes easily 2 days for the calcium levels to come back up. And how do you get the calcium levels back up?
This probably explains why, sorry, I didn't mean to
Go ahead.
interrupt. There's a little bit of a delay sometimes. But this probably explains why supplementation, so many people, especially on a vegetarian or even an ordinary diet, why they have to supplement. Because, you should have seen all of the supplements I had that I boxed up when I went on carnivore. With the amount of vitamin C, the magnesium, all the iron tablets, B1, B6. I can give you a list like 100 items long of all of the supplements that I was taking to try to boost up the red blood cells and the iron. I was very anemic, and just to try and get the blood healthier for A, health, and B, to perform for freediving. You need to have red blood cells in order to hold your breath for a long time. So
you sure do. That's interesting, because you had the blood work and you were seeing low blood values. Your red blood cells weren't healthy. Your iron levels weren't healthy. You probably didn't have quite enough red blood cells, even though you do all this athletic training, which is supposed to increase all that. But if you don't have the nutrients and basically the ingredients to build healthy tissues, including your blood tissue, then your body can only do so much. It can't magically create something out of nothing. And unfortunately, even the synthetic vitamins, in a way, are sort of nothing, because we have to take it at like 1,000 times the RDA in order to get enough out of it. Because those synthetic forms are not as well loved by the body. Just like the plant forms are not in the right form, the forms that you can stabilize from supplements and put in with fillers and stuff are obviously not as effective as the nutrients that are in flesh foods. Flesh foods like meat and fish and various body parts of the animals, the milk, the cheese, those are in the form of a mammal or a fish, and those are something that our body recognizes. It's the form that was active in that tissue. That's the same that we need. Animals are animals. We have the same animal type metabolism. And so it's just easier for the body to get the nutrients it needs from the plant and from the animal foods. And the animal foods don't have oxalate, lectins, tannins, emulsifiers, all these things that plants need for their metabolism. Plants have a totally different kind of world they live in, because they have to be they make energy from sunlight. They stand in one place. They need to be able to stand up without bones, and they do all kinds of cool things with chemistry.
So would you recommend that just not even just for freediving, but just for general health, that meat would be one of the best foods you can eat that's low oxalate and very nutrient dense?
Oh, definitely. And that's not everybody's ready to hear that. And so you can still improve your diet by being aware of plant toxins. And so at the least, if one of your listeners is a vegetarian or vegan and they're not feeling great, the first thing they have to do is admit to themselves that they don't feel as good as they want to feel and that they're becoming really dependent on supplements, and continue looking for the next vegan answer for why they don't feel good and excuses for carrying on to something that's not making them feel well. It's so now it's so popular to do vegetarian diets that it's hard to even notice the connection between, oh, I got pneumonia last year, oh, my shoulder hurts, oh, I'm tired, with the fact that you're not getting enough nutrients from your diet, or there's something in your diet that's irritating your body. It's very hard for people to see that, and partially because you feel pretty good in the beginning, and so you assume everything's great and there's all this reassurance. But the truth is that our ecological niche as a species on the planet is hunter. We are meant to hunt. That's just our role that was laid out for us in our biology, and that's a long history of genetic evolution. The reason we have big brains, we stand upright, we have great grips, we can throw spears, we can communicate and make knives with stones and do all the things we do, build tools, and have a small digestive tract because we can externalize digestion with cooking, and eating animal proteins takes very little digestion if they're not overheated and processed. The more raw and rare an animal protein, it's just much easier for the body to digest and assimilate that. And that's just the way our physiology is. We don't have a big rumen to digest cellulose like a cow. We don't have a big colon like a gorilla to extract nutrients from plants. We're really meant to eat cooked foods or any form of animal foods, and that's kind of a surprise to people. But if we just realize that we've always been hunters until technology and capitalism and industrialism put us into small, tight urban spaces, and profits were available through growing grains and things like potatoes very cheaply. You can grow a lot of potatoes in a small amount of land very cheaply and feed more people inexpensively and build an economy of affluence based on cheap food. And now we just think if we add fortification to cheap, low-quality food that we're not meant to eat, that we're getting away with it. But we're not getting away with it. If we are, then everyone wouldn't be diabetic and fat. We wouldn't have medical facilities on every corner. We wouldn't have so many people needing dialysis and Alzheimer's and autism and all these diseases that are becoming so normal. That's not normal. Health is our norm. Disease says you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I mean, the health benefits that I experienced, even after just now 5 weeks being on the carnivore diet, for those who don't know, carnivore diet is where, well, you're just eating animal products, animal meat, the muscle meat, the organs, the basically from nose to tail, and that's pretty much it. Meat and chicken and eggs, although I eat mostly just the red meat now at the moment. But the benefits that I've noticed, like the health improvements, are just like absolutely mind-blowing. All the stomach aches completely gone. I was always clearing my throat for years and years, since as long as I can remember. That's gone, so no postnasal drip anymore. I was always fatigued, very, very fatigued all the time, and headaches, really bad headaches. Just an overall feeling of unwell, and I could never really get to the bottom of it, what was causing it. And to top it off, a myriad of health issues, like first getting a cold, and then skin infections on my feet where I couldn't even walk, joint pain, inflammation in the joints for sure. I mean, every day it was something else. And now, since even just 3 weeks into the carnivore diet, every single health issue completely disappeared, completely, which is just unbelievable. Also, like, much better mentally, much more focused, much more motivated, depression, like zero at all. So for sure, this is definitely better for me. I can only speak for myself because maybe it's not for everyone, but for sure I will be staying on a mostly meat diet from here on. I mean, I will like to incorporate some other foods at some point, but for now, I will just stick with what's working. But I have a lot of people writing me concerned about the diet that I'm on because of the freediving aspect. Like one message I got, and this is a typical message. I've gotten maybe 20 of these kinds of messages from freedivers from all over the world, just honestly, like, just really concerned. Someone wrote me, blah, 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 the reason why so many freedivers don't use the carnivore keto diet is that fats and proteins burn more O2 than carbs. The rapid weight loss, your body losing water weight, it will boost hemoglobin and red blood cells. For those who haven't been following my Instagram and Facebook posts, my blood cell count, like for the hemocrit and every other value on the blood chart, all went up. So my blood is like booming right now with oxygen and red blood cells. So anyway, he's proposing that the rapid weight loss is my body losing water weight. It will boost hemoglobin and red blood cells because you are eating meat and the concentration is high. However, this is the ideal diet for long-distance runners, not for anaerobic. Carbs consume the least amount of O2, so he's really proposing a carbohydrate diet. And like I said, this isn't the first person writing me this, proposing carbs as the best diet, basically also saying that there's squeeze issues from people on keto carnivore diet. So that's like the typical mainstream thought about carnivore and keto and, well, paleo diets for freediving is that it's just not good. But it's hard for me to believe that it's not good when I feel amazing and when if you just look at the numbers of the blood, the blood is like 1 million times healthier. I'm definitely 1 million times healthier. So I can't imagine this isn't going to help my performance and just my health in general.
Yeah, so there's a lot in that. That's really great. I think that in those concerns from people, there's a lot of mush. They're not really defining what they mean by carnivore keto. And a full carnivore diet is defined by Sean Baker and Amber O'Hearn and the people who are really living on just meat, which is shocking to the modern ear. We've been a plant-based diet for like 400 years. And we're all on a plant-based diet. We all have plant-centric eating. The idea of meat-centric eating was shocking even a couple hundred years ago when explorers were encountering cultures that were still doing meat-only eating, like in Alaska. They live on caribou, seal blubber, and whale blubber, and mostly like 80% marine fats, some fish, and a lot of caribou. And those people were happy and really healthy and sturdy, but they didn't do well when canned foods and flour got introduced, and they started, just like the Native Americans in where the U.S. is now. They've been taken from their traditional diet that was centered on hunting to eating white flour fried in scrap fats. That's considered a quote traditional food now. So really confused about foods and the terms we're using. There's not enough people who've been on full carnivore long enough to be able to say that it harms your diet performance. That's just somebody making something up. I mean, you can't say that. There isn't enough people living on pure meat and who are real divers or athletically performing then no one's pulled them together and said they don't do as well as the people living on chia seeds. That's just making stuff up. That's lack of curiosity. People are devoted to a 30-year-old concept that high carbs are needed for all forms of athletic performance. You can come up with any kind of metabolic theory you want, but theory does not trump real life. In real life, we need you and maybe another 50 other people like you to really do a full this or that and truly compare your performance. And I think comparing your performance with your own performance, your blood values, your ability to dive, your ability to recover, how long you can stay down, all those things, that's the real world. And so let's pull together real world stuff before you eliminate a possibility like, well, maybe cutting out plant foods has therapeutic value and can improve your performance. Rather than saying, oh, that can't happen, why don't you try it?
Yeah, exactly.
What's important is being open to learning and growing rather than keeping human beings stuck. Right now, we're in an era where a lot of our institutions are stuck from that very kind of thinking. We will put something down and deny its potential value without actually looking into it. And we're doing that in science. We're doing that in education. We're doing that in economies. We're doing it in how we lay out our roads and sidewalks. I mean, we're just staying stuck in our old thinking and we're not moving forward. And I think that's really problematic. If you want to think well, you need to open up your mind. And yes, it's shocking to imagine you're only eating meat, but it's a worthy experiment to do because human beings used to do that. When we were hunters, we often lived on just meat, especially in cold climates or during the cold time of the year. There just wasn't enough edible plants around. Human beings had to develop edible plants to build a plant-based diet. But for the most part, if you go out into the woods in North America, you got pine cones and pine needles and some toxic weeds and not a lot there that you can eat that's plant-based. We had to develop potato species. We had to develop grains and develop these things and develop techniques for how to prepare them. And that's all technology. Hunting and eating meat is pre-technology human survival. And that's where we evolved the big brains, we evolved language, evolved into cultures. And so you can't on the face claim that eating only meat is bad for you if that's what you evolved on. And so people want to use modern science theory, like how much oxygen you consume based on what fuel you're burning. That's a very limited view that's probably blinding you to a bigger part of the physiology. It's really better to look in toto, like a whole person's performance, rather than think about O2 consumption based on lab values in a certain context. The context changes when you change your whole diet away from all plant toxins or lower carbs and no plant toxins like in the carnivore. That's a different metabolic context that's never been studied. So you can't say anything about it, but you could potentially study it. And so being open to the question and being open to the study of it, that's where something cool could happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I'm going to experiment on myself for sure. So, and what do you think if someone is on a low oxalate diet? Now, freediving, it tends to take a heavy toll on the immune system, especially when you're doing deep dives. It's very easy to get sick in the next days. So do you think a low oxalate diet would help the recovery from these deep dives, which really deplete your immune system and also release free radicals into the blood?
No question. When you've got a lot of free radicals and inflammation going on, you have more internal production of oxalates. So you've already got too much oxalate in the system just because of the metabolic hit that you've taken from that stress. And you add more food oxalate to that internal production. We know this because there's a disease where people produce too much internally. And that just makes everything worse. And so you have a decay of your basic functions for elimination with the kidney and other elimination glands. You have, you're harming your digestive tract and its ability to get nutrients. You're also now adding a toxin that's causing additional inflammation that's also getting stuck in the body. the big story with oxalates is how much of it's getting stuck in the body that medicine has kind of forgotten about or overlooked because it's subtle. But where it gets stuck in the body is anywhere where you've got inflammation or injury or infection. Those cells are trying to rejuvenate as they try to regenerate themselves. So you get cellular damage from the free dive. Those cells now have to rejuvenate. The replenishing cells have a slightly different structure on them because they're going to have to move and they do different things and they're signaling other cells around them that what they're doing. And they do that by having these carbohydrate molecules on the proteins in the cell membranes. So these rejuvenating cells have a lot of sort of fluffy stuff on their outsides that's sugary, and that's where the oxalates will get stuck. It'll also get stuck on any tissue that's depleted in glutathione. And you're going to deplete a lot of glutathione in a dive. So any cell that's depleted in glutathione cannot protect itself from the free radical creation that oxalates will cause. So it's going to get more injured by that oxalate after a dive. You're also going to see that those tissues that are already dead or dying, they can't defend themselves because they're dead or dying. They don't have any mechanism left to get rid of the oxalate. So the oxalate gets stuck in the injured tissue, the rejuvenating tissue, and it starts to kill off those cells that are gotten depleted in glutathione and can't put together that self-defense anymore. So you're causing additional destruction, and your ability to recover and heal tissues is seriously delayed. And if you keep eating oxalate, you can end up with scar tissue in those tissues instead of working tissue and have a long-term sort of semi-recovery. So if you literally break a bone or injure a tendon or literally have physical damage to cells, that can stick around as some degree of fibrosis because there's oxalate crystals stuck in those tissues indefinitely because you keep eating them. So this accumulation thing not only keeps your tissues from having integrity, but it creates long-term problems with the integrity of those tissues. It becomes more easy to injure them with some other way. So the injury might have started with free diving, but later on you stepped funny off your step out the front door and you've injured your ankle and you're frail. So you're really setting yourself up for becoming more frail and injurable, but also stop eating all the oxalate, then the body wants to clean out these deposits from these injured tissues, from these areas that got injured. And that's a lot of work. And the body now has to produce like a microsurgery to get the stuff out of there. And that causes additional inflammation and tissue damage. So even when you stop eating oxalate and you go...
Are you there? Sorry, you cut out there just at the end.
And I think if this raises questions for people, but the key thing that people need to understand that if you have been eating a lot of cheese at home, you could upgrade your ability of those tissues.
Oh, so that might help explain a little bit why this squeeze issue. A lot of freedivers I know have experienced lung barotraumas or squeezes, as we call them. So maybe that can help explain why once someone has a squeeze, a lung squeeze, it keeps kind of coming back. Like it seems like every time, like if they go past a certain depth, the squeeze returns again and again. And I know some freedivers now, they can't even dive more than 20 meters without squeezing when they used to be an extremely deep freediver.
I think lungs are very vulnerable.
Yeah.
To
oxalate. Do you think the oxalates are kind of accumulating?
Yeah. Yep.
And preventing
very serious.
The injury from closing all the way or properly healing?
Yeah, well, and, your oxalate exposure for your diet is probably quite variable. But if someone with that injury were to work their way down to a low oxalate diet and stick with it for long enough, eventually they could probably recover their ability to dive, but it might take 5 or 10 years to really clean out the lungs. It takes a long time for the tissues to clean up the mess. So you'd be better off with prevention. Prevention is really good when it comes to oxalate. You really do not want to wait until your system's completely toxic with this gradual buildup.
Okay.
And it's really great news because here you are feeling better fairly quickly, but you yourself may end up with some periods and days when oxalates are moving around and trying to come out, and those would be days to not dive.
I see. And is there any way to know which days the oxalates are, like, is there any sort of way to measure?
There isn't a really objective way to measure. It's more subjective right now. The oxalate is hard to measure. It requires careful techniques. It's not fully understood. The way that it's coming out may be just pushing its way out through the mucus. So you might have a day where you've got more mucus, maybe more tartar on the teeth because it's coming out through the saliva glands, or have little panic attacks and funny neurological things. So when you're not feeling well, that might mean your body's doing maintenance and repair work today and needs a break.
And so that's called the oxalate dumping.
Yeah, Susan Owens coined that term working with autistic families, and they saw this when they went on a low oxalate diet. You started seeing rashes and funny behaviors and all kinds of crazy symptoms. And some of that's because as they're moving out, they're causing additional loss of potassium, which causes acidosis. You get these neurological effects, you get these skin effects, you get this fatigue and headaches and neurological, central nervous system effects. So that could be, that's the time to, add some salt, add some potassium, take lemon juice, get some citrates. There's ways we can support the body. Potassium bicarbonate, taking Epsom salt baths with potassium bicarbonate. There's lots of things we can do to help correct the acidosis, restore the potassium, the sulfur, the calcium, the magnesium. So there's a whole set of therapies to get the electrolytes right so that this cleanup process doesn't cause additional loss and destruction of tissue.
Okay. That also explains, actually, that's how I found out about you, because, and after having some steak and having drinking the broth from the steak, I was like sweating and getting really, really hot. And so I sent a message to Emma Farrell, who's the one that kind of turned me on to the carnivore diet. And then she's like, that's the oxalates coming out. And she's like, look up Sally Norton. So, and that's how I found your name. But so yeah, when you start the carnivore diet and you start going into these sort of it feels like you have like a hot flash.
Yes, I have several clients with hot flashes from this, and it's freaky. Some of them, they get this sudden running of the eyes, and it'll be gritty fluid coming out. There's a million symptoms of the system going through these clearing reactions. I'm still having them 5.5 years later, only now I know how to manage them, and I have way less oxalate in my system, and I function a lot better, but it's still going on, But now I can read and function and work. Yeah.
So it starts a lot in the beginning, and then it still keeps going on as the body keeps dumping the oxalates.
The body keeps healing. It keeps deeper and deeper levels of healing down in the bones, the tendons, the joints, the joint capsules, the cartilage. There's all kinds of places for oxalate to hang out in the saliva glands and the teeth and the face, like your elbow or something. If you do tennis, whatever body parts have a lot of bottle of oxalate in. Gradually, it takes 7-something years for your body to turn over your. If it all moved at once, you'd be deathly ill. You'd lose your kidneys. You'd be on dialysis. So gradual is okay, but it still means that you get plagued with these little spells while your body's healing. It's really crazy, but it's the way it is.
But it's a step in the right direction.
It's fabulous. I mean, can't you tell? We feel better because we're not eating oxalates anymore.
Yeah, I mean, It's really incredible.
It's great to share this information because people don't have this information yet, and they, the wise person looks for areas where they can protect themselves from toxins and is willing to step around them. And oxalate is a fairly easy thing to do. Most people say it's the easiest type of diet they've ever done. And because it's very flexible, you can avoid oxalate even if you're still vegan. But you have to be careful to not go too fast. And jumping straight into a full meat diet is a little too sudden, and those hot flashes and things can be severe in people who are really in bad shape. So you gotta be careful.
So for vegans and vegetarians, would you suggest they kind of ease into it? Just start at introducing meat if they want, if they want to, just start introducing it kind of slowly?
Yeah, well, the meat introduction is always helpful because you're going to get more of the missing B vitamins. You're very deficient in B6 and B1, and those are really important with the oxalate situation and biotin. And, if you're willing to take some desiccated liver or get some canned cod liver, actually taste not the oil, but the actual cod liver. Those are like vitamin pills for the body. So that might be helpful in moderation, but too much of that can encourage this cleanup because the body suddenly says, oh, I've got some vitamins now, I can do some work. And you don't want to get that going too fast. You want it to be very slow, behind the scenes, so you don't realize your body's healing. You just want to. So you got to be careful. All of that. If someone's quite sick, has a lot of cloudy urine, has issues, they should get personal attention and learn the deeper stuff.
Okay. Wow. Well, I know we're a little bit over time, and sorry for that. I really appreciate your time. It means a lot. And
I hope it was helpful.
Extremely helpful. Extremely helpful.
Oh, good.
And
good.
I hope we can talk again soon. But yeah, it's been really, incredible learning about low oxalate diets and just how these superfoods that we think are, superfoods are actually doing more harm than good.
They really are.
Yeah.
They really are. So congratulations to you. I mean, you're obviously a good coach because you want your students to succeed, and you're seeing how certain things we're doing is getting in our own way, and you'd like to point them in a better direction.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this has been really great, and I hope we can talk again soon.
We will. Definitely. Very good.